Good morning, and thank you for joining us in today's webinar, which will summarize the 2019 live call and also explain how to apply for EU live funding. My name is Jessica Magnus, and I'm working at the UK Live National Contact Point at JNCC in the UK, and I'm joined by my colleague Claire McMurrow, who also works at the UK Live National Contact Point team. We feel very honoured to be delivering this webinar to a Lithuanian audience today, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'd just like to say a few technical instructions about the webinar in general. So all attendees are in listen-only mode, so we can't hear you. I hope you can hear us. But if you have questions, please use the question function or the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen and type in any questions you may have throughout the presentation. I will give opportunities to raise questions or ask questions throughout the presentation, but please feel free to type in questions and send them over to us. My colleague Claire will monitor the questions and we will respond to them in due course. If there's any questions I can't answer from the top of my head today, please send them on in email and we will get back to you at a later point as soon as we can after the webinar. And please can I remind you that the webinar has been recorded and made available by our Lithuanian colleagues. So they will make the webinar available online once we have finished today, and you can refer back to it in the future. Here's an overview of what I will be covering today in the webinar. So I will give a short introduction to what we're doing in the UK with regards to the LIFE program. I will then summarize the 2019 changes of the 2019 call. We will look at the 2019 call deadlines, very important. I will talk about the two-stage application process and talk about in more detail. I will give an overview of the concept note forms. I will then summarize the 2019 new and old project topics and also talk about the other elements which are important for your application, which are transferability, replicability, and sustainability. We will then look at the concept note evaluation criteria in some detail. And before I wrap up, I will give you an overview of our key lessons, which we have learned from the last few calls. So key lessons, key points, common pitfalls, and so top tips and so on. So life in the UK, it's rather grey and dreary today. So very wet today, but nonetheless, JNCC is the national contact point for the EU LIFE program since 2016. We are a small team of 3 people who all work part-time, but we are drawing on an expertise across the whole of the organization. So JNCC, the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, is a statutory body. We are government funded and we are sitting underneath the Ministry for Environment. As I said, we are a small team, but we draw on expertise across the organization. So we have specialists in various fields like marine environment, air pollution, wildlife, protected areas, and so on. So if we get an application which is very technical in one of these areas, we can ask our policy leads about technical questions. In general, we as the NCP support any applications and provide advice on the LIFE program. And mainly the LIFE program is accessed, or the LIFE fund is accessed by the bigger NGOs in the UK, universities, local authorities and statutory agencies. Since the beginning of the LIFE program in 1992, LIFE has supported over 250 projects in the UK with an investment of just over 260 million euros from the EU. So a very substantial amount of money supporting the UK environment. During the last multi-annual work program period, 2014 to 2017, the UK had one of the largest national allocations with 74 million euros. And we have drawn down most of that money. I think about 95% of that money we drew down. And over the same period of time, the UK was the most successful country in obtaining LIFE funding, with an average success rate of 36.2% for traditional LIFE projects. So, you know, we've been doing quite well in accessing funding. For example, our success rate for the stage one of the 2018 LIFE call was 50%. So 50% of our applications were invited to progress to stage 2. Right, that's enough about us in the UK, what we're doing here. So moving on to the 2019 call and a summary of the 2019 call changes. So what is new in 2019? To be honest, not a whole lot. A lot of the project topics remain the same as in 2018. Also, the two-stage application process continues to apply for the environment projects. The one-stage application process with the full proposal, where the full proposal has to be submitted in September, continues to apply for the climate action sub-program. Most changes in 2019 have taken place in the climate action program, and the call has introduced 10 new project topics for climate action. So that is one new climate mitigation project topic, 7 new climate adaptation topics, and 2 new climate governance and information topics. As I said, no new topics for nature, biodiversity, environment, resource efficiency, or environment governance and information. So all these project topics remain the same as in 2018. The call deadlines you see here on the slide, and this is very important. It's a staggered submission again. So for environment projects, environment and resource efficiency projects, you have to submit a concept note by 17th of June. For nature and biodiversity, it's the 19th of June, and for governance and information, also the 19th of June. Climate action projects have to be submitted as a full application by the 12th of September. And I say this, please don't leave it until the last minute before you submit your application, because we've had cases where organizations missed the deadline because they left it to the last minute, and then they experienced technical difficulties on e-proposal. The system has crashed in the past. You know, people couldn't upload their documents. So there might be all kinds of last minute problems. So we recommend submit your application in good time, ideally a day or maybe 2 days in advance of the deadline. This is the indicative timetable for the 2019 call. So once you have submitted your concept note in June, 17th or 19th of June, The Commission will evaluate your concept notes and provide feedback by October. And if your concept note has been successful, you can then proceed to stage 2 with a deadline of submitting the full proposal in February 2020. The Commission then will evaluate the stage 2 applications between February and June 2020, and you will receive feedback May, June 2020 if your project has been awarded funding. Grant agreements will be signed by July 2020. So the earliest possible starting date for a 2019 project is the 1st of September 2020. I'm moving on to the two-stage application process now. And as I've already said, the two-stage application process was introduced in 2018 and continues to apply only for environmental projects. The climate action projects follow the one-stage application process. You have to submit an 11-page concept note in June via e-proposal, and there's a strict character limit, so you cannot go over the 11-page limit. I will talk about the character limits in a minute, and about what you have to fill in what kind of forms you have to fill in. So this is an overview of the forms you have to fill in. The forms are the same as they have been last year. And they are basically a shortened version of the final application forms. So you have the A forms, the administrative forms, B forms, which is the outline of your project, and then one financial form, the R form. So what should you include in the concept note? You should include information about the coordinating beneficiary. You need to include description about the environmental problem targeted in case of the environment and resource efficiency, and governance and information projects. For nature and biodiversity projects, you need to include a description of species, habitats, or biodiversity issues targeted by your project. You further need to include your project objectives, the project actions, expected results, and impacts of your project, the sustainability of the project results, the risks and constraints, as well as your project partners. You also need to include EU added value of the project, highlight or explain the project character. Is it pilot or demonstration? For nature and biodiversity projects, it's sufficient if it's best practice. You need to include an indicative budget of the project. And here's what you shouldn't include. At this stage, you do not need to include any maps, images, or signed commitments. Also, a declaration of the co-financing is not yet required at this stage. I mean, if you have a declaration of co-financing, your match funding, that is great, and it will help the evaluator. It will help to persuade the evaluator that the financial side of the project is secured, that you have your match funding sorted. But I stress again, it's not a requirement at this stage that you have a declaration of co-financing in place. I will now talk about the forms in more detail. So the B1 form is arguably the most important form of your application. It contains a summary of your project and should describe the environmental problem, the project objectives, action and means involved, expected results, sustainability of the results, and project topic. Please note the character limits of each of the headings. So under project objectives, you have a character limit of 2,500 characters. These need to be realistic, achievable within the lifespan of the project, and provide value for money. They should be listed in a decreasing order. So you start with the most important project objective, and then number them in decreasing order of importance. Remember that EU added value, sustainability, replicability, and transferability are all need to be considered within the scope of your project, and that a strategy will need to be in place for these elements. These themes are picked up again further through the application. So you also need to explain the environmental problem targeted, and you have 3,500 characters for that section. And that is a very important area of your application. You need to be as specific as you can. You need to describe the project area, what problem you're trying to address. You need to be able to describe the environmental problem within 2 sentences. If that's not possible, then you might wonder, is the problem too complicated to be solved by a live project? So describe the extent of the problem, the decline of the species, for example. Why is it declining? In what area? What are the reasons for the decline? Marine litter. What is the extent of marine litter? How many cubic meters of litter do you find in a certain area of the marine environment? That sort of thing you need to explain, and you need to quantify your description. You need to be as specific as you can, and you need to provide the baseline, because otherwise the evaluator might not be able to assess if your project is value for money. So I've already mentioned the project objectives. Under action and means involved, you have 5,000 characters, and you need to list what actions and means will be utilized to counteract the cause and achieve the impact and objectives. Please list the main actions and explain how, what, and where will be done during the project in order to reach project objectives. If the project success depends on involvement of stakeholders, please identify them in this section and clarify how they will be involved. We recommend to undertake a logical framework approach for this area, which is an analysis. It's a project management tool analyzing the environmental problem, crystallizing the objectives and the action and means and how you get there. The logical framework used to be mandatory for live applications in the last live program. It's no longer required, but we still recommend our applicants to undertake the logical framework analysis because it helps them to to distill exactly what the problem is, how they want to tackle it, and where they want to be in 5 years' time at the end of the project. So within the logical framework, you identify the environmental problem by creating a problem tree. The action and means need to be logically linked to the objectives and ultimately to the environmental problem you need to you're trying to address. You can then convert your log frame tree, problem tree, into an objective tree to make sure that you are addressing each element of the problem. You will need to ensure that there are logical links between the cause, activity, and results, and that they're causally linked. So if you're interested in the logical framework approach, please contact us after the webinar, because we used to run training courses for log frame training. Oh, no, going back. Within the expected results, you have 3,000 characters. And in this section, you have to address what the outcome of addressing each cause of what is the outcome of addressing each cause of the problem. Again, please quantify any improvements to help determine value for money. Expected results should not be project objectives, so they're different from the project objectives, but they should be the outputs and quantified achievements, allowing the project to reach its objectives. These must be concrete, realistic, and quantified as far as possible. You will need to start to think about how you will verify these projects. So please think about what indicators you will use. So for the afterlife plan and the sustainability of the project, you have 3,000 characters. And here the Commission wants to see long-term results for their investment, and you will need to demonstrate a clear strategy of the long-term continuation of the project results. This includes, where possible, identifying transfer and replication opportunities. No, I'm still going back. Yeah, the project topics. In this section, you have to place in the project, the priority area and project topic that this project will address from the multi-annual work program and or the specific 2019 guidelines. You can choose a maximum of 2 project topics, although you won't get any more points for choosing 2 project topics. But you have to make sure you meet all the elements of the one project topics you have chosen. So this is the starting point for your live application. Go through the headings of the guide within the 2019 guidelines. Go through the different priority areas and look for this project topics and see if your project idea fits under one of the project topics. And then make sure that all elements of that project topic are addressed. The LIFE program is a very competitive fund, and it will only fund projects which are addressing a project topic. Applications which are not dealing or addressing a project topic won't get funded.
Jess, we have a question. What expected results should be presented? So is it the results that the project organizer expects during the project, or results or the forecasts for the results afterwards? So you can read there.
Yeah, so the expected results should be the results you are aiming to achieve. So by the end of your project, you know, they need to be realistic, of course. You know, we once had an application saying, oh, we want to improve all biodiversity within the UK. We want to stop the decline of biodiversity in the UK for 4 million euros, which isn't very realistic, nor very quantified, nor very specific. So yeah, the expected results need to be quantified, realistic, and achievable. And you need to focus on, they obviously depend on your specific project, but they need to be where you want to be at the end of the project. And then within the afterlife plan and the sustainability, you address the issue where you want to be within 5 years after the project has ended. So you can extrapolate the results that should continue to increase and improve for a considerable amount of time after the project has ended. I hope this has answered the question, but if not, please text us or send us another message via the chat function. Right, so we've talked about the project topics. I will go into more detail about the specific 2019 project topics in a while, but we're just looking at the forms still. So the B1 form. So your project partnership has a maximum of 3,000 character limits. And within that section, you have to describe what the structure of your partnership looks like. Who are your key associated beneficiaries? You should detail their expertise and expected role, including actions they will be responsible for. And how will your project be co-financed by other entities? Has this been confirmed? I mean, I've already said at the concept note stage, you don't need to have a declaration of co-financing in place, but it is very beneficial, of course, if you have, if you've sorted out your match funding. And to note, the project partnership and structure can be changed between the concept note and the full application stages. But all changes must be justified and must not affect a major change in the project's ability to deliver the proposed objectives. No, too far. Within the expected risk and constraints, you have 1,500 characters maximum, and within this section you should examine the main constraints, the limitations and restrictions and risks that may occur during the project. For example, if an action depends on the purchase of land and purchase cannot be made, could the land be leased instead? How might these be mitigated for? What overarching strategy for mitigation might be implemented? So you need to provide a risk analysis and constraints analysis of what risks and constraints may mess up your project. And you have to have a mitigation strategy in place. So how will you address these risks and constraints? So that was the B1 form. Moving on to the B2 form. This is only for required for environment and resource efficiency projects and is about the general character of the project. All other strands need to provide this information in their B3 form, to which I will come in a minute. So in the B2 form, you have to identify if your project has a pilot or demonstration character. Pilot projects are those that apply a technique or a method that has not yet been applied or tested before, or that offer potential environmental advantages compared to current best practice, and that can be subsequently applied on a larger scale to similar situations. Demonstration projects, on the other hand, put in practice, test, evaluate, or disseminate actions, methodologies, or approaches that are new or unknown in the specific context of the project. such as geographical, ecological, socioeconomic, and that could be applied elsewhere in a similar circumstance. So as I already said, nature and biodiversity projects and governance and information projects will have to demonstrate their project character in the B3 form. Environment and resource efficiency projects don't have that. They do have a B3 form, but they don't have this specific tab of the general character in the B3 again, so because they had to do that in B2. So under EU added value of the project and its action, please clarify how the project contributes to one of the several of the specific objectives of the priority areas of the LIFE sub-program for environment. And these are set out in Articles 10, 11 and 12 of the LIFE regulation. Please clarify how the project will contribute to the implementation, updating and development of European environmental policy and legislation. So remember, the LIFE fund is a European fund, and they want to see that the environmental problem you're addressing is of European importance. So you need to make links to European environmental policy and legislation. So your project will need to clearly state why action needs to be taken at EU scale. Therefore, you need to know the scale of the problem at your site, region, and nationally, but also across the EU. And I also recommend to look at the award criteria, the evaluation guidance, which is available with all the core documents on the Commission's website, because that will give you an idea what the evaluator is looking for. So there is, for example, an award criteria, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a while. There is an award criteria on EU added value, and the evaluator will be looking at how is that project contributing to EU environmental policy and legislation. For example, we had a project looking at improving the conservation status of a species in Scotland. And I told them, well, you can't just look at the regional or the local side of that species. You need to look at the conservation status at national level, so at UK level, and at EU level, which is very important, and use the latest Article 17 report for that. So you need to bring in the bigger picture, the bigger context. Demonstrate how the project links to EU environmental policy and how the project will support implementation, update, and development of this policy. As I've already mentioned, you will also need to fill in an indicative high-level budget in the R1 form, and you can see the budget headings listed on this slide here, and they include the direct personnel costs, travel and subsistence costs, external assistance, durable goods like infrastructure, equipment, prototype, land purchase that is not applicable for the environment strand, consumables and other costs and overheads. Please note that LIFE won't fund single items of infrastructure bigger than 500,000 euros. So anything bigger than 500,000 euros in terms of infrastructure won't be funded. The form summarizes the financial structure of the project by providing a budget breakdown for the project and an overview of the financing plan. At stage 2, it will be generated automatically based on the data you have entered in the technical and financial forms, but at concept note stage, you're required to fill in most of the relevant data yourself. So please note that only fields corresponding to the sums as well as values expressed in percentages will be completed automatically. So please note that should your application be admitted to stage 2, you will be allowed to introduce changes to the total requested EU contribution of within a margin of 10%. So there is no limit to other changes in the budget, including the total project costs, but you can only request a change to the EU's contribution which does not increase more by 10%. That's important.
So we have a question. Will partners from the UK be eligible to LIFE projects?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, very interesting question. For the moment, yes, we are still participating in the 2019 call, and it all depends on the negotiations and if the UK Parliament can agree on the deal, you know, which the government has negotiated with the EU. So if that can be ratified, then the UK will continue to participate in EU programs, I think, until 2020. So there's still a question mark over the whole, there's still a bit of uncertainty, but at the moment, we're, you know, preparing to participate in the 2019 call. So yeah, this was the overview of the project budget, the R1 form. Here's a template of the concept note form, which you might find on our website. We have modeled it on the Commission's e-proposal system. So this is the form you will have to fill in when you're submitting an application. So we have produced a Word document from, you know, taking the forms from e-proposal just to help organizations filling in, you know, an application form. This gives you an idea, you know, how the application will look like. So please feel free to go and have a look on our website and download the form. So before I go on to, you know, what changes are allowed between stage 1 and stage 2, are there any questions regarding the application forms? No? Okay. If you think of anything later on, just type it in and send it to us. So what changes are permissible between concept note stage and full applications? So in general, all changes need to be, all changes made after submitting the concept note, so between stage 1 and 2, need to be justified. You need to highlight these changes in the A7 form of your full application. So a certain degree of change will be allowed, however, but you cannot change the critical elements of your project, which got your project through stage 1, such as the main objectives, activities, and actions. The budget, as I've already said, can be changed within the margins of 10% of the requested EU contribution. Right, so now we're moving on to the 2019 call and the new and old project topics. I apologize in advance if this part is a bit dry, but there's a lot of project topics, and unfortunately we can't go through all of them today, but you know, it's just, it can be a bit dry to look at these project topics. But I recommend that you have a good look at the 2019 guidelines to familiarize yourself with the different project topics. And as I've already said, choosing a project topic is the first step of your application. And you must make sure that your project idea meets all elements of at least one or a maximum of 2 project topics. And I cannot stress this point enough, as a lot of applications fail because they do not meet a project topic. And I've already said this, but LIFE is a very competitive funding stream, and projects which do not meet a project topic won't get funded. So as I've said at the beginning, the 2019 call has introduced 10 new climate topics, but the topics for nature and biodiversity, environment and resource efficiency, and governance and information have remained the same as in 2018. And I will now go through them in turn. The environment and resource efficiency strand of the LIFE program is the biggest and broadest strand of the environment sub-program. It includes a total of 28 project topics within 5 different thematic priority areas, which cover the whole length and breadth of the environmental spectrum. The thematic priorities include water, floods and drought management, marine and coastal management, implementation of the EU waste legislation, resource efficiency, green and circular economy, soils, forests, chemicals, noise, industrial accidents, air quality improvements, and the NEC directive, industrial emissions directive, and urban environment, the whole lot. So it is very comprehensive. I will list only the main project topics here now today because, well, to give you a flavor what this program is about. And please let me know if you have any specific questions regarding a project topic, which I haven't covered today because we don't have time to go through 28 different project topics. But yeah, if you have specific questions, just ask us via the chat or questions function. So, for example, under the water heading, the Commission is looking for or is encouraging projects that address flood and drought risk management, reducing pressures from chemical pollutants, and implementing water saving measures. Under the marine and coastal management project, projects should focus on the sustainability of human activities and preventing marine litter. Marine litter is a big priority for the Commission. Project topics under the water industry heading include the elimination of discharges of emerging pollutants and or pathogens. And another project topic is the solution of and treatment options regarding recycled and reclaimed water. Waste is another priority of the LIFE program, and there are various topics under the waste heading, including the implementation of EU waste legislation, the identification and separation of hazardous substances contained in wastes, and waste and resource efficiency. Under resource efficiency, green and circular economy, projects are encouraged that focus on the implementation of the circular economy concept that integrates sustainable soils management practices or close to nature forest management approaches. Furthermore, projects which reduce noise from roads and inside densely populated urban areas and reduce the impact of the environment or human health from listed chemicals are also encouraged. Further thematic priorities include soil, forest, chemicals, noise, industrial accidents, air quality improvements, and the NEC directive, the Industrial Emissions Directive, and the Urban Environment. And these are just the topic headings, and I recommend that you have a close look at page 21 to 30 of the 2019 guidelines if you think your project idea fits under one of these headings. I will now give you a few exemplar projects from the UK, which are environment projects. There's, for example, the laser fence project, which is an awesome project led by the Liverpool John Moores University, which is one of the biggest universities in the UK, with partners in Spain and the Netherlands. And this project looked at, developing an innovative technology to keep animals away from agriculture fields as an alternative to chemicals or harmful barriers. So, animals do tend to graze or, be drawn to agriculture fields. There's a lot of loss for farmers in terms of, their yields because of rodents and deer eating, the crop. So they tend to use a lot of pesticides and rodenticides to keep these animals away, which then also enters into the food chain. First of all, the rodents die, and then they might get eaten by bigger predators, up the food chain. So it has a big impact on biodiversity, on farmer biodiversity, the use of pesticides. So the laser fence project has developed a technology to replace the use of chemicals and harmful barriers in the agriculture field. And they have created this laser fence or agri-fence, which will keep animals away. So yeah, this is a highly innovative project, and the target was to to create savings of around 1.6 kilos of rodenticides over 3 years, going up to 4.8 kilos saved 3 years after the end of the project. So very ambitious. The budget was rather moderate, with 3 million euros. Another great project from the UK is the Life Acumen project, which also won the best life awards. It's led by the Environment Agency of England and Wales with a budget of 2.9 million euros. And this project established the technical and economic viability of capturing, using and mitigating methane from closed landfill sites. So, there are a lot of landfill sites in the UK which continue to emit methane and greenhouse gas emissions even long after they have been closed. So this project looked at assessing the emissions and capturing and utilizing methane from expired and non-operational landfill sites. And their objective was to contribute to a significant reduction in the 12.9 million tons a year of CO2 emissions from closed landfill sites in the UK. Life ECAP is another very nice project, which is trying to cut the environmental impact or the environmental footprint of the clothing supply chain by generating value for business through collaboration, measuring and sharing best practice. So the clothing and textile industry is contributing roughly 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So it's quite a substantial contributor to global emissions. And this project adopted a kind of circular approach to divert over 90,000 tons of clothing a year, of clothing waste in the UK. So to divert 90,000 tons a year of clothing waste in the UK, and eventually that would go up to 700,000 tons a year, which would be saved by 2030. The project is led by RAP UK and has a budget of 3.5 million. I'm now moving on to the nature and biodiversity project topics. As I've already said, they have remained the same as in 2018, and you see them listed here on the slide. And this life strand project should focus on Natura 2000 sites and improving the conservation status of habitats and species, as well as implementing the marine component of the Habitats and Birds Directive. Under life biodiversity, applications are encouraged, who are addressing green infrastructure or projects that integrate biodiversity into financial and business decisions. Projects which are targeting threatened species or habitats that are not included in the annexes of the Habitats or Birds Directive and have the status of endangered or worse in the European Species and or Habitats Red List of the IUCN Red List will, be also considered under life biodiversity. Life biodiversity will also fund projects targeting alien invasive species. So please note that when you choose a project topic, you have to decide if it's either falls under life nature or life biodiversity. It cannot be both. And this is the case for all project topics. You cannot cross any strand. If you choose a project topic from the environment strand, from the environment and resource efficiency strand, you cannot then choose another topic from biodiversity, life biodiversity. You have to stay within this one strand of the life program. I mean, you can have elements of, for example, climate mitigation or climate adaptation. You can have elements of that strand within your project, your environment project, but the focus clearly needs to be on one strand alone. Here's a very nice example from the UK for a nature project. It's the second biggest ever life project in the UK, the More Life 2020 project. And that is restoring blanket bogs in the South Pennine Moors Natura 2000 site. And the aim of this project is to restore over 2,000 hectares of damaged peatland within a mosaic of 10,000, over 10,000 hectares of active blanket bogs. Also, the project was looking at raising water tables to reduce chemical peat erosion by blocking over 50,000 meters of gripes and 57,000 meters of erosion gullies. This will reduce wildfire risk and increasing the habitat resilience by diversifying over 4,000 hectares of vegetation. The project is led by the Peak District National Park Authority and is a follow-on project from the More Life Plus project. This is another nature exemplar project The Life Shard 7 project is the UK's biggest life project with a budget of over 25 million euros and an EU contribution of 7.7 million. And the Life Shard 7 project is increasing access to favorable spawning ground and habitat by 195% for this rare fish species, which is a shard twade, a small migratory species, which used to be very abundant in the Severn. The Severn River is a big river in between England and Wales, you know, in the early 1900s, the fish was very common in the river, and today it's nearly extinct because of the large fish barriers, and you know, the river has been kind of, during the Industrial Revolution, it has been constrained and weirs have been built, so it was impossible for the fish to continue to migrate along the river to its spawning grounds. So this project is looking to install fish access on 5 structures along the river, opening up the old spawning grounds within the Severn Estuary SAC. As I said, it's the UK's biggest project, and it's led by the Rivers Trust, Severn Rivers Trust. Here's the Biodiversity Exemplar project, which is focusing on ecological networks and implementing of integrated habitat networks and a green infrastructure across central Scotland. So the project aims to improve ecological coherence between the most beneficial places within central Scotland. It aims to restore 500 hectares of peatland in 8 different individual sites. 53 hectares of wet and dry grasslands will be brought back into positive management. 97 hectares of wetland habitat will be brought into positive management, and 22 hectares of lagoons will be enhanced for wildlife. 4 islands created for breeding birds, and 1 hectare of wildflower meadow will be created. The project was led by Scottish Natural Heritage and has a budget of 3.1 million. So I'm moving on to the governance and information project topics, and again they have remained the same as in 2018 and include awareness raising campaigns covering one of the 3 listed topics and activities in support of effective control processes, as well as measures to promote compliance. And you will find more information on page 22 to 28 of the 2019 guidelines. Here's two exemplar projects under the governance and information strand, and one is the Future Life, Futurescape project, which is led by the RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, with a budget of 3.8 million euros. And this is a campaign to promote the development of green infrastructure throughout the UK, focusing on 38 priority areas. Our Life Trifocal London is another great project transforming food habits in London and contributing towards London's waste targets, trying to achieve 0 municipal waste to landfill by 2025, reducing household and food waste by 20%, and recycling and composting 60% of municipal waste by 2031. This project is led by RAP, and has a budget of 3.2 million. So I hope this has given you some ideas and a flavor of different projects possible under the environment strand. I will now move on to the climate action sub-program. And as I've already said at the beginning, the climate action guidelines have changed the most within the 2019 call, and the Commission has included 10 new project topics. The overarching goal of the climate action program is still to assist the delivery of the 2015 Paris Agreement, and during the evaluation phase, projects can gain an additional 25 bonus points within the EU added value criterion if the project contributes to the implementation of the project of the Paris Agreement. So the policy area for climate mitigation are still the same and include, the member states and regional local authorities' efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the sectors not covered by the EU emissions trading system and the effort sharing regulation, such as transport and fuels, agriculture, construction, land use, and land use change and forestry. Another policy area is the development and implementation of greenhouse gas accounting and climate change mitigation in the land use sector, the development of land management practices which have an impact on emissions and removals of emission, action which enhance the functioning of the emission trading system and which have an impact on energy and greenhouse gas intensive industrial production, fluorinated greenhouse gas and ozone depleting substances, and greenhouse gas monitoring and reporting by authority. So the 2019 call has introduced one new project topic on supporting the reclamation and recycling of fluorinated greenhouse gases. So at the end of the life of equipment or products using fluorinated greenhouse gases, it's important that these gases are efficiently recovered and preferably recycled or reclaimed for the reuse and servicing existing or changing new equipment. So demonstration or best practice projects supporting and ensuring an efficient recovery and reclamation recycling of fluorinated greenhouse gases, in particular for HFC blends and mixtures, are encouraged by this call. 7 new project topics were introduced to the climate adaptation strand, including assessing the vulnerability and enhancing resilience of public infrastructure, for example, transport networks, security, health infrastructure, water, waste management. That's all under project area 2, resilience of infrastructure. Under project policy area 3, 3 new project topics have been included, including the urban and rural drainage system improvements, preventing saltwater intrusion and freshwater loss in coastal areas, improving rainwater management and resilience to drought. So these are the 3 new project topics included under sustainable management of water. Then there are 2 new project topics under project area 4, resilience of agriculture, forestry and tourism. These new project topics include adaptation of agriculture to the effects of climate change, with particular attention to vulnerability, assessment and adaptation strategies, and the prevention and containment of invasive species linked to climate change. Under project topic 5, the support to the EU's outermost regions, a new project topic was included to focus on improving resilience of ecosystems to climate mitigation and notably precipitation, variability, and drought. Climate governance and information has 2 new project topics, including under climate policy monitoring, assessment, and ex post evaluation. The Commission would like to invite projects which test and implement solutions, building or strengthening the capacity to use spatially explicit geographical data, exploiting existing EU and national data collection systems such as LUCAS, ELPIS, IAX, and Copernicus for the identification and tracking of land use and land use change, monitor and estimate carbon stocks and fluxes in forest, wetlands, and agricultural land at local, regional, and cross-regional level, monitor and communicate of the loss of and degradation of carbon storage, such as grassland loss, degradation, and restoration of former existing wetlands and peatlands. Under the best practice and awareness raising activities addressing adaptation needs, projects should focus on one of the following 5 work areas. Projects targeting the development and use of practical and meaningful adaptation indicators and monitoring systems, and the uptake of climate services in adaptation planning at local levels, so downscaling of climate impacts. Best practice and awareness raising projects focusing on understanding the economic and social impact as well as costs and effective and adaptation implementing concrete actions to address such impacts and costs. Integration of climate change adaptation into the disaster risk management cycle, establishing coordination platforms and initiatives, best practices and awareness raising projects on integrating long-term climate planning and disaster risk assessments, developing common indicators or using lost data as evidence base for policy making, and enhancing the adaptation knowledge base for land use and planning, particularly in remote or isolated regions. And finally, best practice and awareness raising projects focusing on the application of climate change risk assessments at different stages of the infrastructure life cycle. For example, from planning to operation, formulating standardization needs in relation to the climate proofing of types of infrastructure not yet covered by the work mandated by the Commission to European standardization organizations. So you will find all this information on pages 21 to 37 of the 2019 climate guidelines. This was a whistle-stop tour around the new and old project topics of the 2019 call. So before I move on to other elements of your application, are there any questions regarding the project topics? If not, I'm going to move on to what else is important for your application, such as replication and transfer potential. As in 2018, the 2019 core refers to replication and transfer potential. Replication and transfer continue to be key components of the LIFE program, so please give this section due consideration. So the expected replication and transfer activities vary across the priority areas, so please check the guidance. For example, pilot and demonstration projects must have a clear set of action for evaluating the main project findings and outcomes, including the cost-efficient replicability or transferability of the actions and results, and the measures taken to ensure the actual replication or transfer of successful pilot demonstration actions. Proposals that are insufficient in these respects will not be considered pilot or demonstration. Projects need to have a clear mechanism for replication and transfer during and after the lifespan of the project. This needs to be clearly explained within your proposal as to how the results will be replicated and transferred to other regions, countries, or contexts. This goes beyond just simply sharing knowledge and networking with key stakeholders. You need to put the solutions developed and applied within your project into practice elsewhere or in a different purpose or for a different purpose. So could your results be used again in the same way by other entities or sectors? For example, do you know any partners who would be willing to take up your project results within other member states? Will they sign up to the project results, for example? Are you part of a European network that can influence or share your lessons? One obvious way to demonstrate this is to include a partner from another member state, but this is not essential and might not be right for your project. So could your results be used in a different way or for a different purpose? The following activities, I've listed some examples here on that slide for examples would, to demonstrate replicability and transferability of the project actions. For example, you could include an analysis of how the proposed solutions might be applied in other geographic areas or by other stakeholders. Or you could prepare a business case regarding your proposed solutions, be close to market, for example. You could include studies or activities regarding the access of financing resources and negotiating and planning for transfer of proposed solutions into other contexts. LIFE projects are a large investment for the EU, so they want to see guarantee that your work will continue once the LIFE project has come to an end. This has been important in previous calls and is still important in 2019. Sustainability still needs to be a fundamental component of your proposal. To a certain extent, replication and transfer are part of the overall sustainability strategy, but this is just one component. And you will also need to consider how the results will be sustained and continued in the medium to long term. In this sense, continuation means the continued use of the solutions applied or developed within the project. But unlike replication and transfer, this is generally limited to the entities involved in the project.
We did have a question on the previous slide. Sorry to interrupt there, Jessica. If a project plans to build a pilot equipment, but it is still not sure whether it will be profitable and it cannot assess its replication potential now. I'm not sure where that question came from. Do you know what exactly that's asking? Yeah.
So if you haven't got, well, you can still create a replication strategy with a potential. I mean, you don't. So do I understand it correctly that you can't even assess the potential? I'm sure that you might be able to do some assessment of if you take the best outcome of your project and say this pilot project will achieve this and that, and we're going to create these solutions, you could do an assessment of the replication potential if you assumed your project would be successful. I don't know if that was clear. Sorry.
Was my reply? Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. If it wasn't clear, just come back to us with ask for clarification. Okay. Right. Back to sustainability and continuation. So the guidelines are listing a set of questions you will have to answer in your B1 form for stage 1, and it's the B6 form for the stage 2. So for example, which actions will have to be carried out or continued after the end of the project? How will this be achieved? What resources will be necessary to carry out these actions? Protection status under national, local law or site, species, habitat and targeted if relevant. How is the area that you have been restored will be protected in the future? How, when and by whom will the equipment be acquired and be used after the project ends? How will the long-term sustainability of the project's concrete actions be assured? So I hope this has given you a flavor of what the Commission is looking for in terms of sustainability of the LIFE projects. Are there any more questions regarding sustainability, replicability and transferability? It's always a difficult area for applications, particularly if they're first-time applicants. It can be very confusing.
There is a question, should the project be international? When you showed UK examples, it seemed that they are national.
Yeah, it's not a requirement to be an international, transnational project for LIFE projects. It is a benefit though, and you can gain up to 4 additional points during the evaluation period if you have international partners. I mean, that means EU partners, partners in other member states. So yeah, it is a benefit. It's not a requirement. So you can have a truly national project which hasn't got any partners in any other EU member states.
And a follow-on on that, what was their transferability?
Well, if you have an international partner, transferability is always a bit easier to achieve because you can just work with your partner in the other member state, and they say that they will implement and use the solutions you have developed during your project in their country. So for example, the laser fence project was a transnational project with Spain and the Netherlands, and they have developed this technology in the UK to replace pesticides used for agricultural uses. So it was tested in the UK. The Spanish partner and the Dutch partner have agreed to use the same technology in their countries. And there you go, you have your transferability. Any more questions?
One more. Oh, just a thank you.
Okay. So then I continue talking about resubmissions. So I just wanted to include that slide because a lot of our projects are resubmissions, and even on the 3rd attempt. So we had one project which failed twice, and the 3rd time they submitted, they were successful. So don't be disheartened if your project fails. One year you can submit it the next year. And you have a good chance you're successful the next year, because this is due to the clear steer from the evaluator as to how the project can be strengthened when you receive your feedback letter. So please look at the feedback very closely and take on board the points that evaluators have pointed out, which need to be strengthened. So if you're considering to resubmit a 2018 project, the Commission has advised that you should submit it even if you have not yet received your final results from the 2018 submission. So we expect the 2018 projects to be notified if they've been successful in May and June. So that is very close to the 2019 deadline for the concept note submissions. So when the deadline comes around, you might still not have heard if your 2018 project has been awarded funding. So the Commission recommends to submit the project again, and in case it has been successful in 2018, you can withdraw it from the 2019 call. If it hasn't been successful, then of course you have made sure you've submitted it again in 2019. I hope this makes sense. So I just wanted to include a word of caution for any resubmissions. Please be aware that the context varies between years, and it is not always enough to improve on the criticism, on the Commission's feedback. By context, I mean the call priorities or other projects funded by the LIFE program, as well as the policy context. In regard to the call context and what's new and different in the 2019 call, I hope this webinar has alerted to some of the key differences between the years. And in addition to this, the new projects will have been funded since the last call. So we recommend that you look at the EU LIFE project database to make sure that you're not submitting the similar or the same project which has already been funded elsewhere. So your project still needs to be innovative and state of the art. So if a project has been funded on a similar topic, you will have to link to it somehow and exchange lessons learned to ensure that there are no duplication of efforts, because LIFE will not fund a project twice. Finally, the policy context can change, so please make sure that these sections are up to date. Check the latest policy context. For example, make sure that the nature projects link to the latest version of the prioritized action framework, the PAFs, or that there might have been any new environmental policy developments in air quality section or in the climate policy area. So make sure that you refer to the latest section, the latest developments and policies. I just wanted to alert you to any new resubmissions that there is a question within the B1 form of the concept note which asks if the project is a resubmission. So you can use that section to add further justification as to why the project has improved since the previous submission. I will now talk about the concept note award criteria, and I recommend that you have a look at the evaluation guidance, which is available on the Commission's website alongside the other call documents. So once you have submitted your concept note by the 17th or 19th of June, the Commission will assess it against two criteria: the overall quality of the proposal and the overall EU added value. You can receive a maximum of 50 points, and you need to gain at least 15 to make it over the threshold. The minimum pass score threshold that varies between years depending on how many projects are on the short list. So under the overall quality of the proposal, this criteria will focus on the clarity of the proposal, including the description of the pre-operational context, its feasibility and indicative value for money. I've covered a lot of these points already during during the section when we talked about the application forms. This is basically the other side of the coin. So now the evaluator is looking at your application, but it's the same principle. So you have to include the pre-operational context. So the baseline must be described. In particular, the environmental problems and the threats need to be clearly identified. There should be a clear logical link between problems, threats targeted by the project and its objectives, the proposed actions and the expected results. And the main actions and expected results should be sufficiently described and quantified. I've said this before, quantification is key. You need to be as specific as you can. The concept note must also indicate how the project partnership is constructed. Under feasibility of the project, the evaluator will look at, if the project is feasible, and in that sense, the concept note must describe how, where, when, and by whom each of the main actions will be undertaken. Indicative means necessary for the implementation of the project should be provided, and the expected results should be clearly spelled out. Technical means competencies and expertise of the beneficiaries involved in the project need to be adequate for its implementation. So the evaluator must get the sense that you have a team, a partnership, that you are able to deliver what you're promising, what you're setting out in your objectives, that it's realistic, feasible, and value for money. Any main potential difficulties must be assessed, and a realistic mitigation strategy needs to be described. I mean, that refers again to what you need to include in your risk and constraints section in the B1 form. Under value for money, the project must show that it represents good value for money. That means the overall indicative investment should be reasonable in view of the expected impacts and results. Under the second evaluation criteria, overall EU added value, the criterion will focus on the project contribution to the life priorities, its expected impacts, and the sustainability of the project results. And this again is referring to a lot what I have already mentioned regarding transferability, sustainability, replicability, the project topic. The objectives need to be aligned with the priority areas of the LIFE sub-program for the environment. Have a look at Articles 10, 11, and 12 of the LIFE regulation, which are setting out the overall priority areas for the LIFE program. The extent and the quality of the contribution will be evaluated by the evaluator. And to demonstrate the project's expected impacts, which is understood as the extent and quality of its contribution to the implementation, updating, and development of the European environmental policy and legislation, as well as the environmental benefits, must be concrete, realistic, and quantified. To demonstrate sustainability of the project results in the medium and long term, you have to demonstrate the capacity to maintain the benefits in the long term after the project has ended. And the concept note needs to sufficiently describe how these benefits will be maintained in the future. This all needs to be part of your afterlife plan. Transfer and replicability are also considered part of the sustainability. So, are there any questions regarding the evaluation criteria? Again, I recommend to have a look at the evaluation guidance to get an understanding what the evaluators are looking for. Before I wrap up, I'm showing you kind of the lessons learned from our experience, the top tips, and the kind of common pitfalls we have learned from experience in the UK. So here's a summary of key lessons, and live projects must show. I mean, I've mentioned a lot of these points already during my talk, but it's important that you take them to heart, because that is fundamental for any live application. So your project needs to show EU added value. This is a European funding stream, as I've already said a few times. You need to demonstrate why your problem is of European concern. If you do not do this, the project will not be funded. You need to demonstrate that you are testing environmental or climatic solution which is novel across the EU. So your project needs to be innovative. The project needs to be value for money. Is there sufficient impact for the amount of money spent? Life will not fund projects focused on research or large infrastructure items. That's a common mistake what we see with applications, that they try to get funding for research. Life is not for research. There are other European programs which cover research, such as Horizon 2020, for example. You need to quantify your objectives. You need to know your baseline before you submit your proposal. I've said this also many times throughout the talk. And if you're building on from a previous life project, you need to show how this new phase is complementary and how results will be sustained, because life won't fund a project twice.
Apologies again to interrupt. It appears we're still going live. If we can just confirm in the chat window, or if attendees can wave, just to confirm that you can still hear us. We have eyes for that. Yes, brilliant. Thank you very much. We can continue as normal. Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right. Yes, just in case you didn't get this, I was just talking about what live project must show, and I have moved on to our top tips and key points. So, I've talked extensively about replicability, transferability, and sustainability. They are key parts of any application. You need to explain the EU and national context. Don't just focus on the local issues. Identify the problem to be addressed. Describe the baseline, the status quo within the target, a clearly defined target area with quantified actions. Make clear links between the threats and the actions. Use the logical framework approach to have a causal link between threats and actions. Provide evidence for innovation. Keep actions clear and concise, and link to a previous life projects. And last but not least, read the guidance. Honestly, it's out there to help you. It might be a bit daunting because they are big documents, over 100 pages each, but they are there to help you and contain a lot of information. This is the list of our common pitfalls, and it's the reverse side of the top tips. As I've already said, lack of quantification is probably the main reasons why our applications fail, because organizational applications don't state we want to achieve X amount of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. We want to improve the conservation status from bad, unfavorable to favorable for this species by then. by 2020. Oh, well, that would be a bit short, but 2030. You know, you be as specific, include timelines, milestones, you know, amounts as specific as you can. No baseline, again, is a very common mistake applications make. They don't describe the current situation. How is the evaluator supposed to assess value for money if you can't see the improvements you will have made? So if you don't explain the baseline, the current state of quo, how can you then prove that your project has been a success? No relevance to EU policy, that's another common one. I've talked about that in a lot of detail already. In general, insufficient detail to enable a proper evaluation is very common. No demonstration of innovative elements. Action objectives are not causally linked, and no co-financing in place. I've mentioned e-proposal throughout my talk, but just a few reminders. All concept notes need to be submitted through e-proposal, which is the Commission's online application tool. There is a NCP access rights, and we recommend you tick this little box to give your NCP automatically rights to view your proposal, and so they are able to support you with the application process. And the recommended browsers are Firefox and Google Chrome. And I've said that again at the beginning, but don't leave it to the last minute until you submit your final application, because e-proposal, it has improved over the years, but there's still technical glitches now and then, and the site can even crash.
We do have a clarification there. So if it says, therefore, if you want our full involvement, referring to the Lithuanian.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can see if it's a transnational project and a Lithuanian coordinating beneficiary with a UK partner, we can then also see the proposal if you tick the box, as long as there's a UK partner. But we can, you know, it's only the national contact point who is able to see their national projects. So before I close, here's a link of recommended readings and links. There's our website and email address. So if you have any further questions regarding this talk, please feel free to email us on uklive@jncc.gov.uk. Please feel free to look at our website. There's a lot of information on our website as well, including the concept note template and guidance. I recommend you have a look at the LIFE database, which contains all projects funded by the EU. Essential reading is the multi-annual work program and the 2019 guidelines for applicants. And here's a further link from the Lithuanian National Contact Point to the Building Life Capacity in Lithuania. So you find more help and advice on that website. So that concludes my talk of the novelties of the 2019 LIFE call. Have you got any further questions? Please send them across now using the questions or chat function. If you have any questions later on, you know, feel free to email us later. If there's no more questions, then we thank you again for joining us this morning. Good luck and a lot of success in the 2019 LIFE call. And we wish you a good day as well.
Yes, Outer has just come online.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
If you want
Thank you, Jessica and Claire, for explaining life guidelines for Lithuanian life applicants. And if you don't mind, I will say a few words to our applicants about our services, the services of our life capacity building project in Lithuania. And I apologize, I'll do it in Lithuanian.
That's fine. Thank you.
Dėkojame visiems, kurie žiūrėjote šį internetinį seminarą. Taip pat kviečiame dar apsilankyti ir mūsų svetainėje Life Project LT, kurioje skelbėme visus kitus mūsų ateities renginius. Šiuo metu planuojame dar seminarą paraiškų rengėjams, kuris vyks Vilniuje ir kurio metu tikimės taip pat pasikviesti patyrusius life ekspertus, kurio metu galėsite praktiškai pradėti rašyti koncepciją. Ir apie šį renginį paskelbsime savo svetainėje Life Projektai LT bei savo Facebook paskyroje, Life Projektai Facebook paskyroje. Tad kviečiame jūs sekti naujienas ir pirmiems sužinoti apie naujus renginius ir dalyvauti juose. Taip pat raginame pasklaidyti mūsų gidą, kurį esame paskelbę adresu gidas.lifeprojektai.lt. Ir jame taip pat rasite daug klausimų ir taip pat medžiagos padėsiančios jums geriau pasiruošti rengiant live paraišką ir ją kuo puikiau parengti. Taip pat mūsų svetainėje Life Projektai LT rasite ir kai kurias gairias išverstas į lietuvių kalbą. Tai prašome taip pat apsilankyti mūsų svetainės skiltyje pareiškėjams, kur kai kurią medžiagą rasite irgi lietuvių kalbą. So I go back to Jessica and thank you very much for the webinar. Do you have any more questions received to your?
No further questions. So yes, I think that will be us signing off, and it will be available. We'll send all the links and recordings through to yourself to be available to everyone who's attended today.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye. Good luck.
Bye.